BT13 has quite a number of decks you can build in the upcoming format. Remember, with the fact that reprint booster was delayed, we now have no additional cards to add to the pool until September. That being said, as I mentioned last week, each Friday I'll be looking into a Fresh Friday build to add to the meta. This features cards from the newest sets, while my Meta Monday episodes will be reserved for more adjusting and changing current decks. Today's deck features one doggy for another. With the fall of Miragegaogamon X, at least for now, it's time to play with the newest best boy, Miragegaogamon Burst Mode. This deck features a lot of similarities to existing blue decks, predominantly Ulforce Feedramon and Miragegaogamon X before its restriction. As usual, I'm not saying this variant is the best. Rather, I look at discussing potential options that could be used for your variant and potentially your local meta. Wanyamon is arguably the best blue egg for blue decks moving forward, as most of the top contending ones run not one, but several blue tamers. And this deck is no different. You run 8 tamers in this variant, and you do have several ways to play your tamers without paying their costs. Wanyamon also blesses you with a card every time you attack while you have a blue tamer in play. If you don't, well, you get no advantage. There aren't any great substitutions, considering Demi-Vmon requires jamming, and without Nikolai, it's not always active. Additionally, your opponent can play around Upamon's draw effect if they don't have a Digimon without Digivolution sources in play. As for your level 3s, this is probably the most varied lineup for most players. However, while some players may choose to run as low as 10 level 3s, there is a 90% chance that you open up your second hand with at least one rookie. That being said, I don't want to make room for memory boosts, considering these bottom deck tamers. But once the new training option cards make their debut in North America, definitely expect ratios to once again change. Personally speaking, there is a consensus that the level 3s you run for Miragegaogamon are BT11 Gaomon for the potential +1 off the top 3 cards, for a Digimon with Gaomon in its name, and one tamer. And the EX4 variant that your turn when an effect adds cards to your opponent's hand, gain 1 memory. The last 4 cards for my minimum 12 rookie threshold are 2 Vmons for the reveal, an ad for a Digimon with Vidramon and 1 blue tamer, and EX2 Labramon. Vmon can potentially gain you a memory when a blue tamer is played, and in combination with BT13 Gaogamon, hey, that's pretty good. But Labramon, if this Digimon has jamming when attacking once per turn, gain 1 memory. While there is contention that Floodgates could be in your opponent's deck, there are so many decks that have the countermeasure to Floodgates that you might not see them much this format. The rest of the deck is fairly solved and has little variance. For this video, I will discuss why I suggest the following cards based on playtesting. Lanamon, when she Digivolves, can tuck a blue level 3 Digimon from hand at the bottom, giving her jamming. As a result, in combination with Labramon, this could be a 1 memory combo. Meaning if your opponent passed you 2 memory, it's very plausible to counterchoke to 1 and giving yourself a level 5 on board. BT13 Gaogamon though is a mandatory 4 for its ability to play Thomas if you do not have one in play. Though the inheritable, it's alright. While the EX4 variant can return level 3s and its inheritable is identical to the Gaomon of this set. Players may opt to run BT11 Gaogamon if they have more jamming, because again potential memory gain and memory choke. Though the last card and I thought would be amusing to run would be BT11 Vidramon with the number of tamers you have, which can be extra hits for Vmon and also extra card draw when you play your tamers. But consistency wise, having a hybrid for game can be more beneficial. The level 5 line could honestly go any way you want. BT11 Miragegaogamon gives you blocker and plus 2000 DP for every 4 cards in your hand when you Digivolve. BT13 is typically either a 1 of or 2 of, though in my playtesting I personally was playing War Greymon and Machine Dramon, and I feel this card can definitely help. Both of these Miragegaogamons have an all turns once per turn effect that when a card effect would add a card to your opponent's hand, unsuspend this Digimon. But the primary 4 of? The Miragegaogamon that lets you return one of your opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon to hand. Though this is easily countered if your opponent does not play any Digimon that are level 4 or lower. Remember, Tamers don't have levels, but they will have DP. This one has the most generic unsuspend effect and simply requires your opponent to have 8 cards in hand. In late game, this effect is very easy. For the level 6s, Miragegaogamon's best variant is the one from BT11, allowing you to return a level 5 or lower Digimon to its owner's hand. But if no Digimon was returned, your opponent adds the top card of their security to hand. All turns, whenever an effect adds a card to your opponent's hand, gain 1 memory for every 4 cards. This card is a direct counter to many decks that have inherent draw effects. Almost every deck has consistent ways to draw cards, and this deck is another deck that can make your opponent's turn our turn. BT13 Mirage is just a one-of. Returning Tamers in all turns when an effect adds a card to your opponent's hand, you get to play Thomas without paying its cost. That's some free value there. Though in playtesting you might run more of these, especially if your local meta is playing more Hunter variant decks. Though your level 6s are low, your burst modes are the primary finisher of the deck. Even with a stat line of 15,000 DP, this is where you don't necessarily need to fear the security, especially if you're up against Royal Knights. When digivolving, you get to return any level Digimon to your opponent's hand. Then for every 4 cards in their hand, gain 1 memory. When attacking, if your opponent has 9 or more cards, place cards to the bottom of their deck until they have 8, then unsuspend this Digimon. You have so many ways to unsuspend in this deck, but when it comes to these types of decks, there's only 1 card to ever fear. Luckily, you can at least bounce this monstrosity should it ever appear. For option cards, this deck runs 4 in the form of 2 Full Moon Meteor Impact and 2 Sorai. Sorai is the best option card for this deck when it comes to countering the Royal Knight deck. Because this deck has typically no Digivolution sources in their endgame, if their Royal Knights hit Sorai, that is a 1-turn reprieve you need to potentially end the game. As for Full Moon Meteor Impact, what's to say? It's literally removal and can gain memory if it's played from hand, meaning it can be cheaper. For Tamers, you for sure want to run Thomas Norstein, whether it be the BT4 or BT13 variant. BT13 is your memory fixer and can force both players to draw a card when a Digimon with Gaomon or Gaogamon in its name attacks. The other, on play, lets you draw 1 card, and you can suspend this Tamer during your main phase to unsuspend one of your Digimon with Gao in its name if your opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand. But Nikolai Petrov is the Tamer that some Tamers are opting not to run, while others do. Personally, I think Nikolai is beneficial for your lower end for early chip damage, while your other Tamers can lead you to victory. If you don't like Nikolai, this is where you can bundle in some extra memory boosts, or other option cards like Ice Wall or Hammer Spark for defense. In terms of playstyle, this deck is very explosive, being able to potentially unsuspend multiple times in a turn to attack. However, there are a few weaknesses to the deck. The big one being security control. If an option card removes Digimon, jamming does nothing. Some players may try to splash the classic Matt and Sora with a delicate plan, but generally this isn't seen. For security decks, because they don't digivolve as much and typically play 1 card, BT11 Miragegaogamon is one of your best Digimon in this matchup. Quartzmon can also be problematic, but if you can digivolve all the way to Miragegaogamon, you could bounce a Thomas that's suspended to digivolve in a burst mode for free. It's only problematic if they can get back to that Quartzmon again. But the big beef I have with this deck style is that while you are forcing your opponent to add cards to hand, it could help unbrick them in ways that give them outs to your board. In general, what are your thoughts on Miragegaogamon Burst Mode, and which elements do you agree with or disagree with? This deck is currently in my category as the next Doggo list, while Metal Garurumon gets shelved until the official release of the Metal Garurumon starter deck in October. This is Digi-Panda, logging out.